So, what do global thermonuclear war, a $10 gym membership, and a secret tattoo have in common?
I mean, usually. Absolutely nothing, right?
Right, exactly nothing. But in one incredibly dense political interview, they are actually all weaponized to convince you of one single terrifying premise that absolutely nobody can be trusted. Welcome to the deep dive.
And it really is a genuinely fascinating piece of architecture to look at. Like when you look closely at the text.
You realize it's not just a collection of talking points, right?
Exactly. It is this carefully constructed mechanism that's basically designed to shift a listener's worldview.
Yeah, and before we pull that mechanism apart, we need to take a quick second to speak directly to you, the listener, about the actual nature of this source material because, well, it is undeniably heavily politically charged.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it touches on some incredibly polarizing issues, everything from immigration to election integrity.
So let's just be crystal clear right out of the gate here. Our goal today is purely analytical. We are not taking sides.
Right, no side.
We are not validating, endorsing, or condemning any of the political viewpoints, whether left-wing or right-wing, that are presented in this transcript. Our job is simply to act as your impartial guides, to unpack the claims and the rhetorical frameworks used by the speakers.
Yeah, we are basically just looking at the blueprints of the building, not arguing about who should actually live inside it.
I love that. So let's look at the foundation of that building then. If you try to read this transcript chronologically, it kind of feels like a political buffet.
A really chaotic buffet, yeah.
Totally. Like 1 minute it's the Middle East, the next it's a local ballot box. But if you read it for its core theme,
लाइफ
this
इतनी छोटी है
massive
कि हर
blinking
मोमेंट
neon
रोमांटिसाइज
sign
करना तो बनता है।
emerges, and that is the
अच्छे से
concept
ड्रेसअप
of
होना,
trust
नई
versus
जगह एक्सप्लोर
verification.
करना
Which is,
और
I mean,
बस
it's
ये
a
सनशाइन
brilliant
फील
framing
करना।
device.
It is.
चाहे
So
मैं
the interview
खेत में
kicks
हूँ
off with
या
the
घर पे
highest
चिल
possible
कर रही
stakes,
हूँ,
international
सब एनर्जी का
diplomacy
खेल
and
है।
nuclear proliferation. Vice President Vance makes a very specific point to outline that while the United States and Israel share a lot of interests, their immediate objectives regarding Iran actually diverge.
And we should note, that public acknowledgement of daylight between the U.S. and a key ally, that is a very deliberate starting point. He is sort of stripping away the assumption of blind traditional alliances.
Right. So the VP states that the primary objective for the U.S. is ensuring Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. He mentions that thanks to the space created over the last year and a half, there is a belief that they can negotiate a long-term settlement with Iran.
Which, is a fairly standard diplomatic goal.
Yeah, and he acknowledges Israel might not like it, but the U.S. is pursuing it because it's in the best interests of the American people. But here's where he leans really hard into the verification aspect. He explicitly claims that they cannot assume anyone is acting in good faith.
Meaning you can't just take their word for it.
Exactly. And he specifically calls out what he refers to as the Obama deal, criticizing it heavily for lacking a proper inspections regime.
Oh, notice the phrasing there. Inspections regime.
Yeah, why is that so important?
Because he is taking this wildly complex, multilateral geopolitical negotiation and he's reducing it down to a single point of failure, the inability to physically check the work.
Right. And then he promises that the New Deal his administration is pursuing would be a home run for the American people, pointing out that even Iran doesn't want war to continue because it isn't in their best interest either.
Which makes logical sense on paper, but the subtext is heavy.
Well, reading this, my immediate thought was to compare it to, like, a high-stakes real estate transaction, where both the buyer and the seller fundamentally assume the other side is lying about the foundation and the plumbing.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, making the third-party building inspector the only person in the entire transaction who actually matters. So is the VP basically just describing diplomacy as a cynical property sale?
I mean, I wouldn't go quite that far because, well, a real estate deal implies a shared goal of actually closing the sale, right? Point. Here, Vance is framing the situation so that finding the lie is almost the primary goal. If we look at the rhetorical strategy, the VP is essentially arguing that verification is not just a component of diplomacy. It is a complete
लाइफ इतनी
substitute for
छोटी है
international
कि
trust.
हर
Wait, so
मोमेंट
the lack of
रोमांटिसाइज
trust isn't
करना
a
तो
hurdle
बनता
to
है।
overcome.
अच्छे से
It's the
ड्रेसअप होना,
baseline
नई
operating
जगह
system.
एक्सप्लोर
Precisely.
करना
By
और बस ये
publicly separating
सनशाइन
U.S.
फील
interests
करना।
from Israeli
चाहे मैं
interests
खेत
in this
में हूँ
specific
या घर पे
instance,
चिल कर रही
he
हूँ,
is signaling to
सब
the domestic
एनर्जी का खेल
audience
है।
that his administration doesn't do sentimental alliances.
It's purely cold, calculated, and transactional.
Exactly. And by using the previous administration's deal as a wedge, he tells the listener, look, they relied on hope, we rely on proof.
Wow.
It completely transforms a scary, abstract threat like nuclear proliferation
Yeah.
into a very digestible concept for the average voter. We don't trust them, so we will aggressively physically check their work.
Okay, but that logic that systems are fundamentally untrustworthy without extreme verification, that doesn't just stay in the Middle East. The transcript takes that exact psychological framework and just drops it directly onto American soil.
Oh yeah, it's a seamless pivot.
Very seamless. Specifically, they shift the lens of trust from international nuclear agreements straight to the voting booths in California.
So the scale shrinks from literal global annihilation to local ballot counting. But the underlying emotional resonance, the anxiety over unverified systems, that remains completely constant.
It does, and this is where the transcript gets genuinely bizarre, if I'm being honest. They dive into the mechanics of delayed vote counting and mail-in ballots. The VP points out what he frames as a highly suspicious pattern irregularity.
Right, the names.
Yeah, he claims that at one point in the counting, you had Ken Bass in first place, Spencer Pratt in second, and another woman in third. But as the mail-in ballots kept coming in, the influx supposedly kicked the Republican out of the final two, resulting in a Democrat versus Democrat runoff.
We really should pause on those names for a second because they are so jarring.
Incredibly jarring. I mean, Spencer Pratt is a reality TV star from the 2000s, and Ken Bass seems to be a total hallucination or like a misspoken reference to Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass.
Right.
As a reader, you immediately trip over this. You're like, what election is he even talking about?
But that is actually the brilliance of the rhetorical tactics, whether the mix-up was intentional or just a slip of the tongue.
Wait, really? How is making a mistake brilliant?
Because we don't need to get bogged down in litigating the politician's flubs. Look at how he uses these names to paint a chaotic picture. The factual accuracy of the names doesn't actually matter for the underlying argument.
So what does matter?
What matters is the injection of chaos. If the listener hears bizarre names, shifting leads, and a confusing timeline, the system instinctively feels shady to them. He argues that late-arriving mail-in ballots should theoretically follow the same basic statistical pattern as early votes.
And when they don't?
When they don't, he frames that deviation not as a demographic quirk, but as inherently illegitimate.
Okay. And he doesn't stop at the statistical argument either. He goes right for the structural rules of the election itself. He criticizes California heavily for prohibiting ID checks at the polls.
Right, the IG argument.
Yeah, and then he drops this highly specific claim. He cites a U.S. attorney saying that someone could literally register to vote using a gold gym membership card.
Which is such a wild visual.
It is. He and Jesse actually joke about how a gym would hand a membership to anyone willing to pay the $10 a month, which Vance then uses to claim that this creates a massive loophole for an illegal alien to vote.
Notice how the abstraction of election law is suddenly grounded in a highly relatable, everyday object. A $10 gym card.
It's a wild juxtaposition. So the argument here is that the bureaucratic barrier to entry for choosing the leaders of the state is functionally lower than the ID requirements to buy a beer at a bar or like to board a Southwest flight.
Yes, exactly. Visceral, everyday consumer analogies are incredibly potent. Everyone listening knows the friction of going through TSA or getting carded at a restaurant.
Well,
right?
yeah, it's universally annoying.
Right. So by contrasting those strict, normalized verification processes against the alleged laxity of registering to vote with a gym membership, he isn't just arguing that the system is flawed. He is arguing that it is actively mocking the listener.
Mocking them.
Yeah, he's basically telling you, look, you have to prove who you are to live your daily life, but they don't have to prove who they are to decide your future.
Man, that bypasses the dry legalese of election statutes entirely. Like, you don't need to read the state constitution if you understand how a gym membership works.
Exactly. It's perfectly targeted.
But the transcript doesn't let you just sit with that annoyance. Moving from systemic complaints in California is one thing. You can debate ID laws and mail-in ballot patterns on cable news all day long. But the interview then dramatically escalates the stakes.
Oh, majorly escalated.
It moves from theoretical vulnerabilities to actionable criminal legal drama.
Right. We go from the system is dumb to the system is maliciously exploiting you.
Exactly. Mid-interview, the VP delivers what he frames as breaking news. He announces that right before leaving the White House to come do this interview with Jesse, he personally referred a case involving Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to the Department of Justice for a full criminal investigation.
And the timing of that announcement is a critical piece of the narrative structure.
Oh,
लाइफ
so
Well,
इतनी
it
छोटी
creates this
है
sense of
कि हर
real-time
मोमेंट
momentum. It's not just a
रोमांटिसाइज करना
complaint,
तो
it's
बनता है।
action happening
अच्छे
right
से
now.
ड्रेसअप
yeah,
होना,
and the
नई
details of the
जगह
referral
एक्सप्लोर करना
center around
और
a
बस ये
House oversight
सनशाइन
report.
फील करना।
The allegation
चाहे
is
मैं
that
खेत
Tim
में
Walz
हूँ या घर
repeatedly
पे चिल
ignored
कर रही हूँ,
whistleblowers who were
सब
reporting
एनर्जी
fraud,
का खेल है।
specifically because Walz allegedly didn't want to be called racist or xenophobic.
Which is a huge
It's
accusation.
huge. The transcript explicitly claims that Somalian illegal immigrants were committing this fraud. Jesse, the host, chimes in to add that these fraudsters are driving around in Bentleys and Maseratis entirely on the American taxpayer's dime.
Just painting such a vivid picture there.
Right. And the VP says that people shutting down whistleblowers and throwing around words like xenophobe to protect fraud means they weren't taking it seriously, and if it rises to a criminal violation, they are going to prosecute it.
The layers of grievance here are stacked meticulously.
Okay, but I have to push back on the mechanics of this for a second. If you're the Vice President of the United States and you leave the White House, make a formal DOJ referral for a criminal investigation into a political rival, and then immediately announce it as breaking news on a media interview, is that standard judicial process? Or is that a calculated piece of political theater perfectly designed for maximum broadcast impact?
Oh, I mean, it is entirely optimized for broadcast impact. And it raises a fascinating point about the intersection of governance and media strategy.
Tell me more about that.
What we are witnessing in this segment is really a masterclass in stacking multiple pressure points into one single concentrated narrative of institutional failure.
Let's break down the stack.
Yeah, let's hear it. First, you have the financial grievance, right?
Yeah.
The hardworking American taxpayers being robbed.
Yeah, classic pocketbook issue.
Second, you have the visceral symbol of that theft. These fraudsters aren't just stealing to survive. They're driving luxury cars, the Bentleys and Maseratis.
Right, rubbing it in your face.
Exactly. Third, you weave in hot-button demographic and cultural issues by specifically identifying the alleged perpetrators as Somalian illegal immigrants.
Hitting the immigration anxiety.
Right. And finally, the linchpin. You introduce the weaponization of social justice language. You claim that the fraud was allowed to continue, clearly because politicians were terrified of being labeled racist.
I mean, it's almost a complete bingo card of modern political anxieties.
It absolutely is. By tying all these threads together and capping it off with a real-time DOJ referral, the speaker transforms a bureaucratic oversight issue into a high-stakes, culturally resonant crime thriller.
A crime thriller. I like that.
Yeah, because it tells the listener that the lack of verification we talked about
लाइफ
earlier,
इतनी
it
छोटी
isn't
है
just an
कि हर
accident or
मोमेंट रोमांटिसाइज
incompetence.
करना
It
तो
is a
बनता है।
malicious cover-up
अच्छे से
funded
ड्रेसअप
by your
होना,
tax
नई
dollars.
जगह
And that
एक्सप्लोर
leads
करना
perfectly into
और
the
बस ये
ultimate
सनशाइन
political
फील
calculus
करना।
of the interview.
चाहे मैं
Because
खेत में
once you
हूँ
have
या
laid
घर
out
पे
this
चिल कर
massive
रही हूँ,
argument
सब
that the
एनर्जी का
international
खेल है।
systems are failing, the electoral systems are absurd, and the financial systems are being defrauded by people in Maseratis, you have to translate those grievances into actual votes.
Right, you can't just leave them angry. You have to offer a solution.
Exactly. The interview pivots to look at the upcoming midterm elections.
The transition from outlining the catastrophe to offering the cure.
So Jesse brings up the Democrat strategy, mentioning that they've nominated candidates like Tallarico and Plattner to try and win back male voters. He asks the VP if that strategy is going to work. And the VP responds by offering what he calls free political advice to the opposition party.
Oh, I love the free advice trope.
He says it's very simple. Democrats just need to nominate normal human beings.
We really need to spend a